Joining us now is Aaron Haynes, editor-at-large for the 19th, Rena Shaw, former senior Republican congressional advisor, and Julian Castro, the former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development during the Obama administration. Aaron, I want to start with you. This was not a popular policy during the first zero-tolerance phase, and it got criticism from even people like First Lady Melania Trump and former First Lady Laura Bush. So are you surprised that the second Trump administration seems so intent on bringing it back?
I'm not surprised, Christina, because immigration was such a dominant issue, especially for Republicans during this election. And so what you're seeing is the president-elect and this incoming administration really doubling down on some of those immigration policies, even though they certainly were not popular with a significant part of the American people. But, certainly Republicans who voted for this president-elect were saying that immigration was something that they want him to focus on. And as he continues to say that he has a mandate, whether or not you believe that that's true, given that this was a very close election, immigration is something that he's definitely looking to prioritize. Yes, certainly, I think that if we see the return of these family separation policies, I think that we will also see a return of the outcry against these policies for folks who are not on board with this and who are wanting, the federal government to take a more humane position in terms of how the immigration issue is handled. But, I think another thing to bring up is how this plays out at the local level, because in many cases, the immigration situation does also involve local jurisdictions, and the extent to which they are going to cooperate or not could matter in terms of how effective the Trump administration could be in carrying these kinds of things out.
And Julian, Homan also said in this same Washington Post interview, quote, "We need to show the American people we can do this and not be inhumane about it. We can't lose the faith of the American people." Is that possible? Is there a way to carry out this same policy humanely? And do you think Homan is more cognizant of not only the political realities, but the optics of this policy this time around?
Well, I mean, that strikes me as somebody speaking out of both sides of their mouth. In fact, this was a policy that the Trump administration backed down on because it was judged by the American people from right to left to be cruel. And so they stopped it. To say now that we're going to bring it back, family separation, family detention, and that all of a sudden it's not going to be cruel, it's not going to be inhumane, he's painting the same picture of what the policy is going to be, just calling it humane this time. And so I don't think that's going to fly with the American people who have seen what it is. They've seen the images, they've heard the stories. There's still hundreds of children who have not been reunited with their families from back then. It's cruel, and you can't dress it up with words and call it anything else. So I agree that if they reintroduce this, I think you're going to see that outcry that you saw a few years ago.
It's also potentially a very expensive policy. Rena, some estimates say mass deportation will require at least $86 billion. And according to Homan, he can get that type of funding from Congress. Do you think they can actually get that money out of the Hill, given, the disagreement that we've already seen around just stuff like the budget deal?
I think in the new Congress, Republicans will want to look like they are doing something, so they will authorize those funds. And yes, we're talking about a massive amount, but let's not forget what the Republican Party is starting the new year with. The sense that they have a mandate to do right by the American people on this one very prime issue that was central to the election, the security of the southern border, whether we are a nation with borders or not. I mean, look, you and I both know that this immigration system is a complex mess. I'm looking at it from a very different standpoint as the daughter of immigrants from Africa and India, the daughter of two people who went to great lengths to do this legally. I take great issue with anybody who jumps the line, who tries to be clever at overstaying their visa, for example. But I also have a tremendous amount of empathy for the very people we're seeing in the imagery right now, making those treacherous journeys for a better life. How do we as a country start to have a more responsible conversation about the fixes that could have been in the last Congress or could have been under the last administration? It's a new day. Republicans need to start to talk in plain speak. And that's what I think Homan thinks he's doing. He's being very direct about how they want to get things done, because the vast majority of Americans want solutions. This feels like a kick the can down the road issue, and it has been. We know that empirically speaking. Where have the fixes been? Even undocumented young people are suffering in this very moment because, again, yes, decisions their families made, but they too want to see real talk about pathways to citizenship. And I think the Trump administration and Republicans in Congress can do better on this if they speak directly about what their plans are.
Right. Also, a lot of uncertainty from dreamers, who are those individuals whose parents brought them here as children. And the U.S. is really the only home they've ever known. Julian, I want to switch gears a bit and talk about Trump's cabinet picks. We've got Kristi Noem, who's his choice to lead Homeland Security, even though, the North Dakota governor doesn't really have any relevant experience. There's RFK Jr. for Health and Human Services and Pete Hegseth for Defense Secretary. You went through a confirmation process for Obama's cabinet, and you were confirmed by over 70 votes in the Senate. Talk us through a little bit about what's changed, in your opinion, about how these confirmation processes are happening, and what do you think are the chances for a lot of these picks?
Well, yeah, I feel like, I went through this about 10 years ago, that's ancient history and how Washington works now. I think that the operative word today is fear. Donald Trump is trying to get manifestly unqualified, some terrible picks through, not in all cases, but in many of the cases, through fear, through making these Republican senators believe that if they don't vote for his picks, that he's going to recruit, he and Elon Musk and his group of billionaires are going to recruit primary candidates to challenge them come 2026. And so they're deathly afraid of that. That's why so many of them are falling in line. They only have a 53-47 advantage in the Senate, so he can't lose that many Republicans. You're going to see a full-on pressure campaign to make sure that these picks go through. Even with that, though, we already saw Matt Gaetz fail. We saw about 36 Republicans buck Trump in the House last week on the continuing resolution. So there is some question here. Even with all of that fear of being primary, there may still be, a couple of senators that are willing to hold out. I'm looking at people like Alaska Senator Murkowski or Senator Collins from Maine, maybe one or two others, depending on who's especially up in 26 in a state where they feel like they can win the primary, perhaps, but might have a bigger problem in the general election.
Yeah, Rina, I want to ask you about that because, as was just mentioned, the primary threat seems to be a go-to for GOP members who don't go along with either President Trump or apparently now Elon Musk. How real are those types of threats? Do they work on Capitol Hill, or can they sometimes be self-defeating, as, people might get their back up and say, all right, well, if you're going to threaten me, I'm going to vote my conscience anyway?
Recent history shows that these threats do have a great impact, but I think this is a new era. I see Trump doing things a bit differently. And look, people say that Trump's an old man who can't change. Look at how he's already assembling a very different cabinet than I would have expected. I want to give credit where it's due. There are Republicans in this town who want to see things happen differently in this second term of Trump's. And so I think right now these threats are empty. I think Gaetz was put up all part of a little bit of a save for him. It was a Hail Mary and a pathway to getting him out from underneath this microscope. I think some of these nominations are going to be embattled. They're going in knowing that they don't have automatic yeses. But then you listen to people like Republican Senator Joni Ernst, who says something very, very normal, that all these nominees deserve a fair process. They deserve to be heard. And the American people also should listen closely in these processes, because we should listen to what kind of people are offering themselves up to be at the helm of these agencies. These are unelected bureaucrats at the end of the day. So everybody needs to tune in and listen. But I think these are empty threats right now, to be honest, from Trump world. There's a lot more on their plate, a lot having to do with government efficiency and tackling a lot of the federal bloat. There's a lot on the agenda, but really carrying out the vindictiveness, I think, I'm willing to stay a little bit more hopeful this time.
All right, Aaron Haynes, Rina Shah, Julian Castro, thank you so much.